Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join me. We live in very exciting times, and you'll see the slide you're looking at, reigniting your SME value chain in the Corona economy. For some, it might even be building your SME value chain in the Corona economy. The picture that I've selected is very specific and it's very deliberate. Firstly, the Corona economy is very similar to, in many ways, what a war economy would look like. So there's lots of military stuff going on in the slides, and there are good reasons for it. What you're looking at on that very front slide is an armada, a modern day sea war strategy that's used to compete and win against the enemy. At this point in time, an invisible enemy, a very small enemy, but one that has brought us all to a grinding halt. I would like you to very much see yourselves as that front ship, the biggest of the lot. It's the aircraft carrier, Nimitz aircraft carrier. The average size Nimitz aircraft carrier carries a staff of around 4,800 people. Imagine that, all on one ship. And they can stay out at sea for up to 13 years if they're nuclear powered. Where the food comes from is the supply chain that sits behind it. Where the fuel comes from is the supply chain that sits behind it. Where their reconnaissance and insight comes from, besides the technology they have on board, it's the payload, the helicopters and airplanes that sit on the ship itself, that seek ahead and look ahead. So it makes for a very good analogy of a winning big business surrounded by a value chain of SME partners, providers, customers, and clients. And that's the theme I'll be sharing with you. So to start, we're all in the same ocean and we're all in the same storm. Globally, right around the world, this is being felt. We still have a large number of our bigger businesses that we work with suffering with regard to supply, effective supply, reliable supply in their supply lines. China is only getting back to work now. We might well be last on the list. I'm sure those factories are completely overcapacitated and overladen. Plus, the nature of the Chinese manufacturing environment is one where you have big assembly plants, which we would typically deal with as South African companies importing Chinese products. But those assembly plants are serviced by an extensive net of highly specialist SME suppliers themselves, who too have to get back to work. Once they do, we then have to wait for the entire shipping and air freight process to come back to life. At the same time that China started to go back to work, Germany shut down. So as the two big factories of the world, we're seeing a massive delay in their supply chains or ability to service us as South Africans, which means that we are still all in the same ocean, even though China has been through the worst of it, so they say. I'm going to be using a lot of analogy and imagery around a ship and boats, and there's a very specific reason for it, because we believe that every business owner should be the captain of their own ship. Jacques Cousteau inspired many youngsters, many years ago to all become marine biologists. He was this French marine biologist who really brought, in many ways, the world of the sea and what lives under the sea into the imagination and the lives of millions and millions of people. This was his particular ship. He was the captain, and he had a number of features which are very similar to you and I operating and running businesses. You should build your business as you would sail a ship. In the first case, a ship would always leave from a port to head towards a destination. In the same way, everybody started a business, everyone's building a business, but where is that business going to? That can be defined by the targets that are set at a corporate level. It can be defined by the practicalities of a small business owner saying, well, I want to turn this into a wealth creating asset for myself. I want to earn income from the business. I want to put my kids through school, and I want to be left with something afterwards within which to enjoy the rest of my life. A lot of private business owners are in very different positions, obviously, to people who are successfully, gainfully, corporately employed. They rely on their businesses to provide them for a pension, an income, a retirement fund, as opposed to provident funds and other insurances that classically you find in amongst employed people. Every business has a crew, as so does a ship. Without that crew, you can't function. A ship is quite complicated, as is a business. You need people who sit in the engine room, you need people above the deck, you need people on the bridge, you need people who operate the galley, in other words, the kitchen, the canteens, people who operate the equipment, including the helicopter, which you see on the back of the ship over here. A good crew is a crew that understands what they need to do, when they need to do, how they need to do it, and understand what their systems and operating processes and procedures are. It's very often you find that already in place in big corporates, but in smaller businesses, seldom do you find it in place. And until it is in place, you can't get that business to grow. Every business has an engine room and a bridge. If you think about where the engine room sits, there's the propeller of the ship. The engine room sits there. So underneath there, it's below decks. It sits and creates a ballast, a weight in the ship to keep the ship steady at sea. And the bridge is at the top. There it is. And as you can see, the bridge has got a 360-degree view. It has all the instrumentation above it. It has a big dashboard. Life in the engine room is where operations takes place. The purpose there is to turn the propeller. The propeller simply gives you forward momentum. It is busy. There are monthly, daily, weekly, hourly, minute tasks that need to be performed, what we classically call the operations of marketing, sales, and fulfillment. It takes place in the engine room. Alternatively, on the bridge, that's where you get the direction of the ship. You can navigate through the storms, you can see where you are, and you can be sure that you have enough food, fuel, and water to move from your departure point to get to your destination. It's critical that that function, that managerial strategic function, takes place up on the bridge. Because you have the instrumentation and because you have line of sight, you're able to get it done. What's interesting is that for a small business to grow into a medium-sized business, the single biggest challenge we often find is that the person who started the business or the team that started the business still find themselves in the engine room. So they are churning away, keeping the engine going, dealing with operational daily activities like never before, but seldom do they have any strategy to turn all that effort into positive forward direction towards a destination. That destination, we often argue, should be an asset of value. As I mentioned earlier, a private business owner, if they fail to build their business into an asset of value, they fail to ever secure the opportunity of a sale, and in so doing, they fail to ever create a pension for themselves and their families. So we are all out there. There are different sized ships, without a doubt, But here's the reality. The sea, the ocean, the storm that we are all sailing in right now is the same right around the globe. I don't think it's ever been like this until perhaps the previous pandemic in 1918. But quite honestly, the world was a far smaller place. It was far more spread. It was far more consolidated. It didn't spread nearly as widely as it has today. Today, the pandemic and climate change remain the two unifying factors that we, the world, can choose to unify against and become one. It really is a place where big business and small business alike are sailing in the same ocean. All of us, of course, heading to an asset of value, or our definition of it, and all of us will take different paths to get there depending on the resources we have available and our capabilities. So be the captain of your ship. The first part to succeeding in this is to take a view on the future. What we're seeing at the moment, this is a graph coming out of the United States, is that the first reliable daily testing capability produced at the moment from Abbott Laboratories will be available at 1 million tests a day in the United States. That's around June, July of this year. We then see that we're going to have the first vaccines appearing late October, early November. They will be given to priority personnel in the healthcare system. and to people who are mostly at risk. In other words, people with pre-set conditions that corona, should they catch it, could kill them, or elderly people. It looks like we will only have a broadly available vaccine in the United States around March, April. So what's interesting about this graph is a couple of things. They're coming into their summer season, which is going to slow the spread of corona. We're going into our winter season, which is going to increase the spread of corona. They then expect a second fairly substantial big bump at around this time next year, or just earlier in the year next year, their winter period. And it seems that the vaccine will only be available around March, April, May, June. We should take a view that says the vaccine will only really be available probably August next year. So we have a year and a half with which to manage the environment and build our businesses that we have to traverse. In South Africa, we have opted to create a risk matrix, which includes 3 elements. And this risk matrix is governed by the capacity of our health services. What the risk matrix does is it says we're going to open the economy based on your business being categorized in one of 5 different buckets of risk. So a bucket of risk is one that says, how valuable are you given your sector and industry to the economy as a whole? How important are you from an employment point of view? And how risky are you from a social distancing contagion point of view? This will all be announced this evening. So they're looking at economic value, they're looking at economic stress, they're looking at transmission risk. The business that you're in, based on the sector and industry you're in, will fall into one of those 5 buckets. The idea is that we will open up the economy first for bucket 1, then bucket 2, then bucket 3, then bucket 4, then bucket 5. I'll give you an indication of what is bucket 5. So a casino or conferences and events are all in bucket 5. They create some work, not a whole lot of work. Their economic value is moderate. Their economic stress is equally moderate. In other words, they're not in a deep supply chain, but their transmission risk is very, very high. So that gives you a sense of what those 5 buckets look like. And we will then enter into the economy from May through bucket 1 all the way through to bucket 5. That will be determined by the extent and the capacity of our health systems to cope with the inevitable infections that we're all going to suffer from. The view that we have is that for the next 24 months, we will open the economy and then draw back, and open and draw back, and open and draw back, until we have a vaccine available for all South Africans in order to prevent the horrible idea of death impact that everyone has spoken about in the coronavirus. We then have to prepare our businesses to cope with that kind of environment. So where do we start? And what is the starting point? Well, when you set sail, you need to have a good sense of what's working and what's not working. So firstly, understand your risk rating in the crisis. And not all are equal. Are you a corona high, medium, or low risk based on the type of industry and sector you're in? Size makes a difference too. If you've got extensive resources in your business and you've got really good reserves because you've managed to accumulate reserves over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, or you've had foresightful leadership in the business that has certainly not declared all reserves out as dividends and kept some sort of buffer to cope with any shock or unexpected crisis, then you're in a very good position. But in the small, medium business space, very few companies have got extensive resources and most have very, very thin reserves. That's been as a result of 2 factors, or 3 factors. The first is the small, medium enterprise environment is extremely competitive. Did you know, for example, there are about 540 companies in South Africa that generate a taxable income above 100 million rand. That's it. 540 to 570 companies that generate taxable incomes above 100 million rand. Yet, from 0 to 100 million rand, there are around 180,000 companies. The level of competition in the SME economy is enormous. The next thing that leads to thin reserves is the terrible, terrible circumstances we have lived through with Eskom. And then finally, because of a whole host of reasons, the inability for our economy to gain growth and traction has also depleted the reserves in most of these small businesses. The other thing that is important to consider when you build your strategy around how you're going to work with SMEs, you need to think about what you need. Suffice to say, the way that all businesses approached the day before we went into lockdown is going to be very, very different in the way that we need to approach post-lockdown to get to the same benefits, gains, and growth rates that we enjoyed before Corona came to us. The reason for this is simple. If you think to your own personal circumstances, and in fact, think about the business you're in as well, your environment has changed. On a personal level, the way you want to be serviced by all your service providers, the way that you want to be treated, the way that you want to buy, your personal set of economics and capabilities around your economics, all of it has changed. So on an individual basis, everybody has experienced a change. On a business basis, well, it's quite clear, everyone has experienced a significant change. If we say that success in business is understanding who you serve and understanding them in terms of the problems you solve for them, and even further, understanding how you need to create the right experience for them to learn about how you can solve their problem, and for them to enjoy the manner with which you solve their problem, then the problems we're solving and the experiences we're creating need to be fundamentally different for clients and customers going forward compared to what we had before. It's for that reason that every business will reset, rebuild in order to reignite. When you look at that within your environment, what is the speed of the rebuild you need? What is the quality? And how certain are you that it will work? A very good way to approach this is to really look at a business like one would look at an onion. And please bear with me, it's a completely insane, crazy, weird analogy. But an onion has all its flavor in the center. It then has some bone on the outside with the final skin, the outermost layer. In the same way, look at your business in the same light. You have an inner layer to your business. That is at the heart of your business. What is core and what is strategic? In other words, what is your reason for being? I'll give you a simple example. If we think of a data analytics business or that create data information, management information, the two core activities over there is the ability to take data and manipulate and slice and dice it, and then the ability to present it so that your clients and customers can understand it. If you don't have those capabilities in terms of skill and talent, if you don't have those capabilities in terms of capacity, knowledge, resources, technology, and equipment, you can't even exist. Those two technologies are core and strategic, and you need to hold and guard them. The next layer is everything that's not core, but is strategic. So let's go back to this data analytics business. Do they really need to have full control over their hardware? In other words, do they need to be experts at buying software, at buying computers, at buying screens, at getting the computers to talk to the screens, talk to the printers, at getting the technology to settle? No, but a lot of them do have it. Do they really need it? They really need it because it's strategic. Is it their core competence? No, it's not. There are service providers out there who have that as their core and strategic competence. And in an environment where you're looking to reset and reshape your business, that next layer becomes important, because you might well take services that you currently own that deliver that next layer and instead look to outsource and partner with providers who are expert in that field. It gives you agility, which will be important in sailing through the balance of the next 2 years, and it gives you massive cost saving too. The final layer, the outermost layer, is everything that's non-core and non-strategic. So quite honestly, something like, for example, team building, you know, a day out where you go climb trees and jump into rivers and do crazy things, whatever people do. You don't ever have to own that. You don't need it. It's not strategic. Would be nice to have, but in those instances, it's a nice to have, not a have to have. I will simply outsource that to companies that do that, who find that to be their core and strategic offering. So we've got three layers with which we need to disassemble our businesses in order to prepare the resetting and reshaping and rebuilding of our businesses. So let's get ready to compete. If we've understood our businesses in that light, how do we work with SMEs to our advantage in order to compete? The economy is going to be reset. It was very interesting listening to the president's delivery this week. There were a couple of words that were absolutely key and paramount in everything that he said. It's quite clear to me that he is looking at this crisis with a great deal of positive, inspired, opportunity-driven action. He spoke about reshaping our economy to be more inclusive, to be transformative. That means across size, across sector, across race, across gender. None of those features will change because this presents the single opportunity for us to get it right. In a crisis, everyone's expecting change. In a crisis, everyone's accommodation of change is going to be far more forgiving than if things were back to normal. So we work with you to win with SMEs across your entire value chain. When that race begins and the winds begin to blow and we're out there in the economy, how do we do this? Well, firstly, through your BE score. In working with SMEs, businesses doing less than 50 million Rand a year of annual turnover, in this instance, businesses that are 51% more Black owned, we help you get your ED points. We help you get supply development points. But more importantly, in that process, we work with you to turn suppliers earning ED points into suppliers generating preferential procurement points. It's a significant part of your BE score, and getting a single, clean, consistent flagship strategy right there is of enormous value. ED points can be gotten and gleaned from your customers. In other words, points that help you generate revenue. Supply development, as you well know, needs to tie back into your supply chain. And there are many interesting ways of doing it. Should you be, for example, in a services business that has very few small suppliers, or should you be in a business that imports product from very large OEMs, making you and putting you in a position where you have very small suppliers, there are other ways to secure the capabilities of SMEs in order for them to come into your supply chain that at the same time feed and support the ability of your business to secure revenue through marketing and sales. Market access. We heard the president said an expanded public works program is going to be deployed. It's part of the 500 billion Rand investment in reigniting the economy and to support us through the corona economy we're living in. We've seen it before, and because of the words transformed and reset that he mentioned previously in the paragraph before, talking to the public works program, we know that there are going to be set-asides. Set-asides are where government chooses and wants a tender to be drawn out for the supply of services or products or work to be done that is significant and only able and capable to be delivered by a large corporate. The pressure is on the corporate to then open up its supply chain and find appropriate SME suppliers so that they too can be included in the opportunity presented by government. We know that the charter codes are consistent, they're out there, they vary. If you're in the technology sector, if you're in the mining sector, they're constantly being adjusted. We keep very close to them in order to ensure that in working with you, we're not providing a generic service, we're providing a service that's absolutely customized around your circumstances but also the sector and industry charter codes that govern your environment. We've seen it from Trump. I don't know if any of you are watching these wild, crazy daily Corona briefings, which he's effectively using as a platform to rally and support his nomination. It has very little to do with any intelligence or coherence around Corona. But the one thing that he has been arguing for some time, and he's using this Corona environment to double down on it. He's saying that globalization doesn't work. He's saying that localization is crucial, it's important. It keeps jobs in a country. He's not wrong. He's saying further, through the Corona economy, the mere fact that we relied on suppliers outside of our country, it stalled our ability to respond even quicker than we so-called have to the requirements of healthcare services in order to protect our people. That thinking is also coming out of the United Kingdom. It's coming out of certain parts of Europe. Everybody was caught on their back foot looking for PPE equipment and looking for ventilators, most of which come out of the East. I think that the shift in mindset that will be mobilized and motivated by using fear as a lever is going to be for more countries to look inwardly rather than look outwardly. So I think localization is going to be driven. It's going to become a key area of activity and focus and attention from government. Innovation and acquisitions, there will be so many around. We have created for a number of clients innovation labs, both here in the United Kingdom and the United States. What that effectively means is this: if you're a large business and you have a CEO sitting high up on the bridge of the very, very large ship, that individual's propensity to want to take risk is low. Those CEOs and that C-suite is being watched by analysts and investors on a daily basis who demand that they deliver very short-term results. And here's the problem with innovation. Innovation fails a lot more than it should or than you would want it to before it eventually succeeds. Innovation, if you think about it, is also necessity-driven. So I'm doing this because I have to, but what I do know is that I'm going to try and try and try and try again. And after multiple failures of seeing what does not work, I will find what does work. There are very few CEOs who want to be attached to that level of risk. And what that's done is it's put us in a situation where we work with corporate entities who have turned around and said, we need to, within our sector, within our industry, explore the new technologies, the Internet of Things, drones, artificial intelligence, telematics, augmented reality, etc., etc., etc. Or please create for us a portfolio of SMEs within our sector, within our industry, that are harnessing those technologies in the hope that they will find a new path to lead our sector 5, 10, 15 years from now. We want to work with them. We want to put funding into them. You grow them and get them to a level, to a point where we can see the technologies working so that we can acquire them afterwards. That's right on the edge of SME portfolio strategy that we're seeing around the world. And then there's portfolio investing. A number of our clients have opted to work with us through a Section 12J fund, in which their ESD spend has been placed into the fund, offering them tax breaks and returns. And that money then gets utilized to support the growth and scale of a business. What's interesting about that strategy is they're not chasing an SME portfolio that's wide and shallow. They're looking for fewer SMEs that have the ability to get into the supply chain with the view that they've selected those SMEs sufficiently well, and in working with us, we build them to scale so that they can go into the preferential procurement point segment. It classically means long-term contracts for those SMEs that are managed and moderated against performance targets of those SMEs delivering into your supply chain against a quality and price standard. Finally, SME cost and revenue generation. And I would implore all of you in the position to, in an environment full of change, full of uncertainty, full of flux, really look at all your suppliers in your supply chain. from the largest to the smallest, and ask yourselves questions. Who am I going to get the best value from at this point in time? Who's going to respond quickest to my needs? Unless we can get our supply chains alive and activated, it's going to slow down our ability to move into the economy. And if we find ourselves on the back foot with the competitor on the front foot, the economy is able and capable to receive service and product. You could just find yourself a month, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 3 months behind. When you look at your supply chain from an SME perspective, look at it from 3 areas or 3 perspectives. The first is, yes, from a BE score, absolutely crucial. That's where supply development points come from. That's where preferential procurement points come from. Next, look at it from a transformation point of view and say, are there businesses out there that, should they transform, can double up and impact on our preferential procurement points? Next, look at them from a cost efficiency and service point of view. We've got some key critical suppliers over here. If they could improve their efficiency and drop the cost of their service or product, but maintain the quality of service, we would be winning. There's no reason for you in procurement, in transformation, to not look at your SME supply chain in that light. And in the same way, look at your customers in the same light. If you think about who the SME portfolio in the front end of your business, that take your products to market, who's performing there, who's not performing there? If the market is going to change because of the resetted economy as a result of Corona, who's going to be the first organization to read it? It's going to be that channel, that client, those companies that you sell to, who effectively and eventually sell to other clients and companies with your products and services. They are going to be the first people to pick up the signals of change and what needs to change in the products and services that you offer them in order to get their customers to bite. Their success with their customers will be your success naturally as a result. So let's start at the supply chain. What can we do with you? Well, the BE score, I've mentioned it. Enterprise development points, supply development points, preferential procurement points. This is not just about finding Black-owned suppliers. It's about finding Black-owned suppliers that fit with your service level agreements. The way that mines procure services and the ways that financial institutions procure services and the ways that the hospitality sector procures services are filled with small little differences based on compliance and regulation, based on risk, based on a whole host of other factors. Simply getting an SME into your supply chain because it's Black owned is only half of getting your ESG points right. The major part of this is to be sure, A, what do I want to procure from them that I need in order to improve my performance as a business? And more importantly, what are the criteria that I'm going to put in that service level agreement that I would want that SME to build its business to fit well with? If we approach it from that perspective, then you have the opportunity to identify 4, 5, 15 lines of service that you want satiated or supplied by SME suppliers. It lets us go to market to find the biggest possible pool of qualifying small, medium enterprises to supply. And it lets us go through a very rigorous process of selection to find those businesses that we believe would fit most immediately with your supply chain capabilities and requirements, but importantly, have the potential to scale. So your investment in supply development turns into preferential procurement points. A localized economy, I've spoken about it. It's going to happen. It's an inevitability. When you start getting sight of what that needs to look like, it's really important, I believe, that you get ahead of identifying potential SME partners that would effectively fall in and fit with your supply set-asides. And then we have the sector charters. The restructured economy is an inevitability. It's going to be very interesting to see where this 500 billion rand comes from. And I think that 500 billion rand might not even be enough. There is talk of finding external sources of funding. And whoever that external source of funding is, whether it be the World Bank, whether it be the IMF, whether it be the BRICS Bank, whether it be some other source, it will come with terms and conditions. The one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that the economic ministry guiding our economic strategy in the country is not going to forego two elements. Transformation, in the first instance, that is based on race, but it's also based on size. I know that the country needs and wants and desires a more evenly distributed economy, but it's also going to include massive, massive localization, attention, and focus, because that's how it will be brought to bear. In the demand chain, aircraft carrier. What would it be without the reconnaissance plans flying ahead of its path in order to read the market and revert back saying, change direction, or we need to actually clear mines that lie ahead, or we've engaged the enemy, we've engaged the market. This is what we're seeing. From a BE score, this is where you apply your enterprise development points. Do not let the enterprise development budget be set aside. Really think about how you can reach customers, end customers, with intermediary SMEs as channels. It is such a wonderful opportunity to do right now, because as mentioned, those SMEs are speaking to discrete markets, small groups of people, and they're getting it right from the horse's mouth around how those small markets and small customers and small collections of people see their world changing. If you work with them, they're your earliest signal to indicate how you need to change your service to that channel in order to get that channel vibrant again. I call them the first responders. And it's pretty logical, isn't it? Your growth comes from your customer growth. If you already have customers in your demand chain that are made up of SMEs, this is a good place to apply that budget. If you don't have budget, it's still a good place to apply attention and service. It's, again, their growth is your growth. It's a win-win. Innovation I've spoken about in the labs. Those labs set up opportunities for your organization to experiment with innovation that doesn't appear on the balance sheet and that doesn't interfere with the risk performance of the business or the economic performance of the business. It puts your C-suite executives in a positive place where they can turn around and say, we have got some fingers in the pie of new innovation and we don't carry the risk of it directly. So you build this portfolio outside your core business. The reason I think it's going to become interesting and important in South Africa is I can promise you that people are going to be doing things very, very differently. And I'll give you a good example. We recently engaged with a new SME. They do around 80 million rand a year, and they serve one of the very large OEM automotive brands. And what they do is they travel right around the country visiting all the tire fitment centers. They've got vans or bakkies, beautifully branded, fully stocked. They're mobile showrooms. The work we're doing with them now is to turn those mobile showrooms into digital showrooms. So it fits with the Corona economy, massively reduces the cost of service and delivery, and immediately increases customer engagement and activity. That's the kind of thing an SME can build for you with a view for you to acquire that SME only once you can see it working. Partners, what are we to you? How do we fit in this entire equation? If that's you and you're carrying a massively valuable load, a ship of this size, a ship of this nature, to effectively unload its value in order to generate its returns and investments, needs the support of the tugboats. We very definitively fit into a role where we can work with you across the value chain, suppliers from an SME perspective, demand chain from a customer perspective, and within the heart, the core of your strategic offerings, we can create innovation labs to support future innovation within your organization at a dramatically reduced risk level. This makes us strategic to you, but non-core. The services and tools we use to save, build, and deepen SME portfolios, there are a number of them. Sourcing and selection. Over the last, I'd say 7 years, we have run around 84,000 business owner psychometrics. You see, when you work with SMEs, it's really important that you understand how that business is being led. What is the psychology? What is the attitude? What is the character of the person who started and is building and leading that business? The reason is this: small businesses, up to about 120 million rand a year, are businesses that are very, very vulnerable to the mindset of the owner or owners. We have got tools to really understand what a winning psychometric profile looks like, as opposed to one that's going to need a lot more effort, attention, and work. We have the ability to take any SME, if the jockey is right, and capacitate and scale that business. We have a very structured approach that we call an asset of value. We have 7 steps to it, and on top of it, we're able to apply it during lockdown to an SME, in the period post-lockdown for an SME, and certainly once things have settled, thereafter to accelerate the growth of the SME. The work we're doing with SMEs now is helping them engage with their clients and customers in order to understand how they need to be of service to you differently. How do they engage you differently? How do they serve you differently? That process is taking place during lockdown right now with 460 odd SMEs. Once we go from lockdown into, let's call it the amber economy, the orange economy from red, we're then going to be working with those SMEs to get them to test their new value propositions, their levels of service, their pricing, their quality, in order to get to a place where they can see what their new offerings need to look like. And then we move into the green for go part of our program. And that is once they have traction and once you have signed off on their ability to serve, the quality of service, the pricing of service, we work very hard with those SMEs to scale them so they can migrate from your supply development points into preferential procurement points. A lot of the work we're doing at the moment is helping them digitize. A lot of SMEs were caught on the back foot, unable to have communications effectively with you as customers or with you as suppliers if they're in your demand chain, with their own staff and with their own suppliers. We're doing a lot of work around that, and we have a big initiative currently being built out to get the SMEs in South Africa into firmly the 4th industrial revolution. That's the opportunity this crisis has created out of necessity. We have funding and risk management capabilities. I've mentioned the fund that we have. It's an equity fund. We have loan funding capabilities. And importantly, we've got grant funding capabilities. Simply applying grants to SMEs in this economy with no conditions attached would be almighty foolish. And I'll tell you the reason why. The circumstances behind every business owner is very, very hard to interpret. If the grant is being provided to the business in order to support the business's sustaining itself and growing, then the grant can be provided certainly to earn you very beneficial points, but it should come with conditions attached. In other words, apply the grant as if it's a loan or investment. For example, should you be putting in a grant of 300,000 Rand to a business, let's work with you in order to identify what the money is needed for. How will it be invested? How does it support the capacity of the business to scale and service your needs? And what are the targets that need to be met? Let's then break it up into 3 milestones, putting 100,000 Rand against achievement of each milestone. Yes, it's a grant earning you good points, but it's money that's very, very well applied and strategically applied and responsibly applied too. We have enormous reporting capabilities. Ultimately, when we're talking from a BE point of view, we report to the standard of the BE Commissioner. We report against verification agency requirements and standards. That's important because ultimately, if you're in transformation, that's what you'll be held accountable for. We then have a series of webinars and boot camps. We use that really to support brand in a time of crisis. So we work with a number of providers that, out of sheer concern around the SME portfolios they've built, have asked us to run a series of webinars to give insights on how small business owners can survive and thrive in the corona economy. We've run a number of boot camps, teaching them how to engage with and learn to engage with clients and customers through screens. We have a series of books and learning. We fundamentally believe that a good business owner is a reader and they need to read. It's been said many times before, top CEOs, recognized top CEOs globally, read somewhere between 20 to 50 books a year. There's no reason why we as small businesses shouldn't be doing the same thing. In fact, recently we produced a book called Sweat Scale Sell, How to Build a Business in a Very Difficult Economy. It talks to the winning mindset of business owners. It talks to their actions and their activities. And we've run a number of events where the book has been provided digitally, a corona issue has been provided digitally. And within a period of time, people have read the book. And then we have almost a book launch where we field and host questions from the readers of those books in relation to their own businesses. It really takes knowledge and turns it into action. And then we're running a series of campaigns. We have a number of campaigns that are running with corporate partners that want to position and locate themselves effectively in a legislative environment in and around the green economy. The corona economy has taken attention away from climate change, but climate change is still happening, it's still there. In fact, I would take you a bet. The next crisis after the virus will be climatic. All these resources we make available at auric.com. The recording of this webinar and other webinars are all available. You are more than welcome to draw off them and provide them through to your supply chains or demand chains, the SMEs you work with. If you think they are of value, please use them internally too. The principles of how you build a winning business in a crisis applies all the way through from the smallest to the largest. Again, for the simple reason that we're all sailing in the same sea. Certainly different boats, different ships, different vessels, but it's the same sea. And the nature of the economy is that we are all interlinked. One of the big issues we have been driving very hard with our clients is to negotiate effectively with non-operating overhead providers and suppliers, be it landlords, be it SARS, be it the telcos, be it your insurance companies. We are working really hard with our SMEs to hold on to their talent, their skill, their team. There are two reasons for it. Without that, they won't be able to serve you effectively when you open up your supply chains or when you start requesting that they increase their channel to market so you can grow your sales. But on the other hand, we all know that every job lost impacts every single one of us here. We're all in it together. If there's specific questions you want answered, please visit the site, send them to me, I will receive them. And as I mentioned, here is the book, Sweat Scale Sell, Build Your Business into an Asset of Value. It doubles down and deepens all the techniques that I've shared with you only very superficially here, but it goes into the practical aspects of how you reset, rebuild, and reignite your business. And it's available on Audible. For those of you who don't listen to Audible, I would strongly recommend it. I use it extensively. It lets me read books on a consistent basis, whether I'm waiting to meet with people, having a meal, or when I used to drive to events and meetings. That doesn't happen anymore, but still I would recommend it. It's even useful to get the best return on time when you're taking a break and sitting on the toilet. And with that, I thank you all very much for joining me. I hope you found this valuable. Please be free and welcome to send comments in the chat function, but alternatively, please pass this on to others that you think might benefit, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care, be safe, be in action. Bye-bye.